Building Men is brought to you by Finish the Race Apparel, FTRapparel.com, the creators of all things building men, and by Become Stronger Industries, become-stronger.com, the creators of handmade steel maces, hammers, and other badass equipment.
I pray that I have the grace and the patience to be able to hold my words, to speak slowly, to be intentional with my words with my children, and to have them just remember that their dad was somebody that cared, was kind, and was a good person.
You're listening to the Building Men podcast with Dennis and Anthony Miralda, brothers on a mission
to help you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
The Miralda Minute is brought to you by Corona Premier. This information is based on an article done on lifesavvy.com. Splash cold water on your face to instantly calm down. If you find yourself stressed, anxious, or otherwise hyped up in need of a quick fix, take a moment and splash some cold water on your face. Here's how to do it right and get the full benefit. It's not just a staple of movie tropes and montages. Splashing cold water on your face is a biological cheat code to immediately calm down. How does it work? We and many other mammals have what is known as the mammalian diving reflex. It's a hardwired psychological response to immersion in cold water. When triggered, our heart rate actually slows. Blood is redirected toward our core to protect critical organs, and a host of other energy and oxygen conserving mechanisms come into play in anticipation of us holding our breath for an extended period of time underwater. When you're not doing some sudden and unexpected free diving, however, the benefit is that you get all of the calming effects without the risk of running out of air. So if you're feeling stressed out, if you're feeling anxious, go to the faucet, turn on to ice cold water, splash in your face a couple times, take a deep breath, and calm down. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Building Men podcast. As always, I am your host, Dennis Miralda. I'm looking for a better introduction. I think one of the first questions I'm going to do when I start off an episode now is ask the guests, how would you start off your podcast? If you had an open mic and you're going to start something off, what would you do? Craig Daigle is our guest today, the unfiltered life coach. My man, Craig, if you were going to start a podcast right now, you hit the mic, what would be your intro line?
Dude, I didn't expect to be put right on the spot.
Right on the spot. Coming in hot.
Back to what we were just talking about before we started. How do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered? Like, how do you want people to talk about you? How do you want to show yourself to the world? Like, that would be how I would start my podcast. You know what? I'm going to start a podcast now just because you said that. And that's going to be my first episode. I'm going to come on and I'm going to be like, how do you want to show yourself to the world? How do you want to be remembered? And how do you want people to talk about you?
Building Men will buy a sponsorship ad on your first ever podcast. I love that question sparked a level of inspiration for you moving forward. Yeah, it's funny. I start the podcast and I went back and I listened to the last episode that you were on, and I was thinking, oh man, that's how I started it last time. And then I'm hoping in 100 episodes from now, I'm thinking the same thing. Oh man, that's how you started back then, because I've since harnessed it in a way that sounds really polished. So you were on the Building Men podcast, October 24th of 2021, called it The Unfiltered Life with Craig Daigle. And it was episode number 87. That was the first time you and I got an opportunity to talk. And since then, we've talked several times over the last year. And I hope I've got to know a little bit about you, about your life. And we've just shot the shit as friends, pretty much.
Yeah.
And we jumped on today and we were talking for 20 minutes before hitting record. And you've been going through a lot in your life recently, a lot of peaks and valleys, a lot of highs and lows. Yeah. And the coolest thing about you, Craig, is you are unscripted, unfiltered. You're like, put it all out there on the table. This is me. This is what it's about. You don't hide anything whatsoever. And I said, is anything off limits? Is anything off the table? You're like, I'm an open book, my man. Talk about anything at all, which is one of the things that I love and appreciate about you. And as we were talking, it was an emotional couple minutes as we were talking. And for those of you listening, you might want to grab a box of Kleenex just to have on the ready before the episode gets going. So you talked about, how do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy? So if I were we'll start there in a really deep way, Craig. So for you, in 50 years from now, when you're pushing up daisies and someone's talking about you, how do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy?
Yeah, it's the craziest thing. It's this thing that's really been brought into the forefront of my focus over the last 7 years, right? Like, if you go back and you listen to that first episode you and I did, and you kind of hear a little bit about my story, there was a moment where my story almost ended, and even prior to that, there were moments where I thought about, taking my own life, to just end it and to not have anything going on. And the more that I thought about this, thought was, how do I want my children to speak of me? What is the legacy that I want to leave behind for my children? How do I want other people to talk about me when I'm gone? And I know that that's kind of morbid and that's kind of like a scary thought, but we aren't promised tomorrow. And it becomes more and more evident the older that I get. The older that I get, the more real that life is short is in the forefront, right? And we're not meant to be taking up space here. This is not like what we are passing through. Life is this moment in between the dash, right? Where we pass through, and it's like, how do I want to be remembered? How do I want people to speak of me? Do I want people to have negative memories of me? Do I want people to think about the time that I yelled at them, or that I was angry towards them? Or do I want people to remember me as the person who helped put them on the path to a better understanding of their own life, or to happier times, or to have memories of me that they're going to cherish, especially my children? Like, how do I want my children to view me? And don't get me wrong, by no means, I'm not the perfect dad. I fail all the time. I continue to learn about fatherhood and parenting every single day. There are tons of books out there. There's tons of podcasts out there. The best way that I've found to learn about parenting is through my children. They teach us every freaking day, Dennis, right? Like, there is no textbook that can tell you what is going to come out of your kid's mouth and how you handle it. There isn't. Like, they can give you like possible scenarios and instances, right, but when it happens, like, well, what do you do? I pray that I have the grace and the patience to be able to hold my words, to speak slowly, to be intentional with my words with my children, and to have them just remember that their dad was somebody that cared, was kind, and was a good person. Right? I think that that's the most important part of being a father, but not just being a father, but being men who are doing what it is that you and I are doing, and talking about those hard topics that men don't share.
Right on, man. And I appreciate you going down the road of speaking slowly and doing it with intentionality. One piece of advice that I've given quite frequently to parents of teenage boys is, don't discipline when you are emotional. It's real easy in that moment when you're pissed off, when you have that fire lit under you, that you speak out of a place of emotion and you can't take back those things that you said. So what I tell parents is, when you're fired up, or when the kid's fired up, don't come at it from a place of emotion. Say, listen, kiddo, you done fucked up here, Aaron. Go sit in your room for about a half hour. Bring it back. I'm gonna calm down. You calm down. Take a couple deep breaths, and then have a conversation rather than a screaming match. That's one piece of advice. If you're a parent of a kid right now, you find yourself getting into those arguments, use that strategy. Take a couple beats. Take a minute. Go take a walk around the block, and then come back to it in a place of calm, in a more serene way. Then you're having a conversation rather than a yelling match. I love that you do that. And it's done with intentionality, Craig, which is one of the things, like I mentioned, I appreciate about you. So you went through this incredible life journey in the past. It's been less than a decade, if I remember correctly, 2015 or so. So the answer that you gave, Craig, how much different is that answer than it would have been 7 or 8 years ago, when you were 400 and something pounds, when you said, how do you want to be remembered? Was it the fun guy who was, pounding Big Macs and chugging a 40? How was your answer differed from that? time ago?
It would have been completely different. I would have been remembered as the funny guy. The that was a mask. Number one. Number one. The fat funny guy was a mask. You know, I think of like Chris Farley. I was that. Like I was depressed, broken inside, but everybody else thought that everything was fine because I was just hilarious to be around, and I would crack jokes about myself and just use humor as a mask to cover up that I was hurt. You know, I used that. I used one H word to cover the other H word. Humor was to cover the hurt, bro. Like it was completely there. And, you know, I love what you were sharing about communicating. That's solid advice for any situation, not just with our kids. Like in our marriage, bro. Like, and I don't win at that all the time. It is so hard
Right.
to not let emotions take over. You know, something is said, and you're like, you know that they're wrong, and it's sometimes hard, especially as a man, to not want to be right versus being understood. I don't need to be right, you know? But yeah, 7 years ago, brother, I don't know that I would have been able to answer that question authentically. I don't know that I would have been honest because I would have probably lied. I would have said that I want to be remembered as, you know, the funny guy that everybody loved, which is great. But I don't want that now. I don't want to be remembered as the guy that everybody loved. I want to be remembered as somebody who loved everybody.
And you were in, not only were you morbidly obese, I believe that would be the correct term, right?
Oh
400 and
yeah.
something pounds. You were in a marriage and it was abusive in nature, and there was drug and alcohol abuse. And you speak very candidly about that on the podcast. And again, one of the things that I've appreciated about you was starting that conversation. I had so many people after the episode I had you on, Craig, reach out and say, you know, it was so cool to hear someone talk about that without being afraid to say, listen, I was a man in a situation where I was a victim in this situation, because if I'm getting punched and kicked and screamed, whatever, I'm not going to fight
Mhm.
back, because that's seen in a negative way as well. After going through all of that with the weight loss, how, and the survivor, quote unquote, of that domestic abuse situation, how has how have conversations with your kids changed? Do you speak to your kids frankly about those things? You say, listen, if you're ever in a situation like this is what dad did. This is how I overcame it. Here were some things that I did well. Here are some things that I really messed up on. Talk to us a little bit about how that conversations have happened with your kids since then.
Yeah, you know, my oldest, he's 16 now. He'll be 17 in April. He remembers it very well. You know, we talk about it a little bit, and he's kind of shared openly different things, but it hasn't been a complete conversation piece. I think that my actions and how I handled the situation are in the forefront of his memory more than my words.
Mm-hmm.
I think that um, so we show our children, right? So an example, um, you know, my dad is a wonderful father. My whole life growing up, he told me, "Don't smoke cigarettes. Cigarettes are terrible for you." But my dad would tell me that while smoking a Marlboro Red, right? Um, I feel like, and I ended up smoking for a period of time in my life. You know, it's our children follow what we do more than what we say. So the conversations haven't been there yet. I know that they will be probably as they get older or as they face these situations. And I'm going to be looking for those moments, man, to be able to um, listen more than I speak, to hear what they need the most, to be intentional about what I share. Because there's so many different things that I want to tell people in those situations. And it's so hard. People hold themselves into those places for so long, you know, like like we said before, you're a victim once, after that you're a volunteer. And we volunteer to be in these situations because It's an identity that we hold on to. We hold on to the identity of being a victim and victimizing ourselves because we don't know anything different, and we get stuck into that perpetual change. But one of the most recent things that has come up a lot. So my middle son Cooper, he's 10. His biological mom doesn't see him. He's the one from my marriage that went through the divorce. I have full custody of him. He lives with me. We spend all of our waking hours together. He's basically my goose. I'm Maverick. He's Goose. The living goose, not the, but he's my wingman. He's always with me, and there have been instances because he was 3 when that happened. But he's also been around for conversations. He's been around for lawyers. He's been around for guardian ad litems, dude. Being investigated during all of those cases, and he was there for it all. So sometimes questions arise, and he'll talk to me about things, and he'll ask me about his mom, and I don't sit there and say, hey, your mom, I don't use my animosity towards her for him. He should never choose who he should love. I simply just say, hey man, I know that she cares about you and she loves you and that she would love to be a part of your life. She's just not able to right now. And I'm not sure what that reason is, other than she needs to take care of herself. And, him and I we'll sit down and we'll pray for her. We'll pray that one day she gets better for herself, not for him, but for herself. We'll pray that, maybe there'll be a different time when it's right for her to be able to be around, when it's healthy for her and for him. And he's very understanding in that sense, and he's very understanding that he remembers her, and he remembers some of the things, good, bad, and indifferent. But I try to focus on the good, right? And kind of like what we were talking about, the exercise that I was going through recently. But yeah, it's something that I try and navigate still. I don't know that I have the answers, but I try to listen more than I speak in those moments, because you'll often hear what you need to say. And most of the time, dude, honestly, I swear, like they're not my words. Like God literally guides me in those conversations when I'm slow to speak, and I just wait for the right words. Sometimes I get done speaking and I go, man, that was good. I need to write that down. I don't even know where that came from. And I know that it was from deep in here, but it was also from the right channel,
I think one of the tricky things is, Craig, and I appreciate you sharing that, is being able to share your story with authenticity without having it come across as sour grapes dragging someone else's name through the mud. And that's something that I struggle with in my own life. And I've taken the path of, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to stuff everything down, let people believe what they will. And where I've settled on it with my kids is, if my kids ask me a question, they're ready to hear the answer to that question. And that's what I would tell teachers. I would tell parents that all the time. If a kid asks you a question, they're ready for the response to that question. And the way that I decided to answer questions like that moving forward is, I'm going to say, this is how I feel and this is how I felt. I don't have to say, well, these are the facts. This is black, this is white. This is how I felt in this situation. And no one can dispute how you're feeling or how you did feel in that situation. So that's where I've settled there. You also mentioned the do as I say, not as I do, with your old man smoking the Marlboro Red. And I believe that was part of our life when we were growing up, Craig. I remember a commercial that was really, it's got to be one of the top 10 most commercials that really kind of smack in the face when we were growing up. And there was a dad, I remember, he had like a white collared shirt on. He looked like an Italian guy with a mustache. And he finds a cigar box, and he's screaming at his kid, who taught you how to use this stuff? And he pulls out, the cellophane bag with the white powder in it. And the kid's like, you, dad, I learned it by watching you. And the tagline was, parents who use drugs have children who use drugs. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's really sensationalized. But being a parent now, I totally get that. And insert anything, any habit into the drug habit there. If your kids see you living an unhealthy lifestyle, laying on the couch, they're seeing you smoke and drink and party and do whatever it is, and you're telling them something that's the antithesis of that, it's bullshit. So your kids will learn by your actions, not your words in situations like that. Do you remember that commercial? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I do, dude. I remember. I mean, there were some outlandish. You can't find commercials like that now.
No.
You will never see real commercials like that. I mean, there were some outlandish ones too. Don't get me wrong, but you won't see those like nitty gritty. I'll call them down to the nitty gritty commercials that really hit on the hard topics. But yeah, I remember that, and that's the thing. Like, just like you said, and that was, been one of the driving forces between me working towards having healthier habits. And I'll say healthier habits because nobody is perfect. Like, don't beat yourself up over, my kid didn't eat a vegetable today. Like, no, but if you're going to do it, they're going to do it. That's like one of the things that is always a hang up for people working with me with health and fitness and nutrition. And they're like, I really want to eat healthy. I want to do better. I want to lose weight. I want to feel good, but my family's not going to eat like I will. And I'm like, but you're the adult. You're the adult. You literally decide what you put in the grocery cart. They're going to eat whatever's available. If they might not like it at first, they may push back, it may be apprehensive, they may fight you and argue. At the end of the day, guess what? You're the freaking adult. You're the one that decides what goes in the fridge, what goes in the shopping cart, what goes in the cabinet, and what goes into your kids. Stop driving them through the Chick-fil-A drive-through and buy them something healthy. I guarantee you they're gonna eat it. They may fight you on it at first because this is new. This is like mom and dad are serious. Like, this is bullcrap. I want to eat fruit snacks and chips all friggin' day. Well, don't buy them fruit snacks and chips. Buy them fruit. Buy them fruit. Buy them crackers. Buy them some healthier choices. And they're gonna toe the line. They're gonna follow suit. And at the end of the day, you can find things that your kids will like and eat. But to use them as a crutch for why you don't do something is just outrageous to me. It's completely outrageous. It's just using them as another excuse for you to be lazy or for you to use convenience instead of a little bit of effort.
And I think what happens too is that parents are seeking some type of validation from their friendship with their kids, that there's something missing in their own lives, and they seek that connection through a partnership with their kids in a way that's unhealthy. So your kids, while you want them to look to you for guidance and for advice and for mentorship, they shouldn't be your best friend. There may be a time in your life that, your kids grow up to that point where that works out in that way. But when they're 9 and they're mad because they have to eat a damn asparagus spear, then they're mad. Then you'll be hungry. You're not getting SpaghettiOs every night or whatever the shit is you're going to put on the table. And that's okay. And if your kids don't like it, that's okay. You're the adult. You're the parent in the situation. Find another connection in your life where you can have that need for friendship met. It's your responsibility. They weren't asked to be put here. That was a choice that you made in some capacity. Your children are sitting there at the table. Help them understand what healthy habits are. And if they don't like it, tough shit. Mom and dad said
100%. 100%. And my wife reminded me, it was literally this week. Her and I, we were talking because I'm off work until January 3rd. Okay. So my whole mindset, and like I was sharing with you, I just came off of a 30-day run out of town. I was in Ohio I was in Cleveland, Ohio for 27 days, and I worked 25 days out of the 27, 12 hours a day. The only 2 days that I took off were Thanksgiving and Black Friday. And now I'm home. And I'm trying to like do more with the kids while I'm off because I have the time.
Right.
But my mindset is let's go somewhere, let's go do something. Because I want to, go enjoy something. I want to take them to the aquarium, or I want to go to the children's museum. I want to go do something. Now, you do not need to spend money for your kids to enjoy you. And this is something that like I always, because I want to be the giver. I want to like have those memories and the adventures and the things. So we were talking and I said, look, I want to do one thing while we're off. And she reminded me, she said, they don't care about those things. What they care about is you. They care about sitting down with dad, reading a book, sitting down with dad, doing board games, going for a walk, being on their bike, being outside, kicking the soccer ball around, throwing the football, throwing the frisbee, catching the baseball. That's the stuff. That's the sauce. That's the secret sauce, dude. It's not going to the amusement park. I mean, yeah, y'all are gonna have a good ass time going to Disney and whatever. You're gonna make all these memories. You can make even better memories grabbing a fishing rod and going to the pond for the day than you ever will going to Six Flags. I promise you. I promise you, make a lunch, go picnic, take them to the park, go do some things. And, my wife drove that home to me because I'm like, oh, I'm trying to make these plans. I'm like, let's go to the trampoline place, like let's go to the arcade. Let's go to, Dave and Buster's. They want that. I mean, we all do. Don't get me wrong. Spend time with your damn kids. Like, just do it. And my wife, God bless my wife, she keeps me centered and she keeps me in my place in all the best ways. But that reminder was huge. Like Monday night, I sat there and we made potato latkes with our kids. The last night of Hanukkah, we sat around and we made them by scratch, by hand, me and 3 of my sons. And that's the thing that they're going to remember. They're going to remember eating those fresh potato pancakes off the plate and, listening to music and making them by hand with their dad. They're not going to remember the roller coaster. Maybe they will, but the thing that's really going to be in their forefront, back to the beginning of this video, how do you want to be remembered?
Right.
How do you want your kids to remember you? As the dude who took them to an amusement park ride, or as the dude who did that, but also handmade food with them, spent time, read books, quality time. Quality time is so important, man.
Chasing money can pad your accounts, but destroy your physical and relational health. I'm Julie Holly, raving fan of the Building Men movement and host of the Conscious Investor podcast. I want to personally invite you to the upcoming Conscious Investor Growth Day held at the gorgeous Coeur d'Alene Resort in North Idaho. This one-day event focuses on the 3 pillars of conscious investors: health, mindset, and wealth creation. It serves as a waypoint for conscious investors that creates grounding and opportunity to course correct and be renewed. Join us at the gorgeous Coeur d'Alene Resort on Saturday, March 18th. And you know what? Use this one day to fuel up and then spend a couple more days exploring the best of North Idaho. When you use promo code BUILDINGMEN, you can save 10% off your registration. I'll see you there.
Building men of character, integrity, strength, compassion, and empathy through coaching, mentoring, professional development, facilitation, and motivational speaking is our mission here at Building Men. To work with me, information is in the show notes on our website at buildingmen.io, or you can send me an email at buildingmencoach@gmail.com. We are here to help you become the strongest version of yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Now, back to the show. And the making your kids eat the vegetables and doing those things around the house with them, spending the quality time, those aren't the sexy things that are going up on social media that everybody's like, oh, well, their family looks so happy. I can't believe they went to France 3 times in the last year. But those are the things that the kids remember. Craig, it's funny that you mentioned that and that your wife brought that to the forefront for you. I was talking to my middle daughter, who's 15 years old now. She's a freshman in high school, and just about some memories she's had over the past couple of years. And she said one of her best memories was on her 12th or 13th birthday. It was when she was, so it would have been her 13th birthday when she was in 7th grade. And I asked her why. And so that year, she's a huge book fan, like, and she nerds out on, she reads everything, voracious reader. And in my family, we loved Harry Potter. And every year after Christmas, before New Year's, we would do a Harry Potter marathon. And we would watch all 8 movies. It takes 20 hours. It was a tradition that we had in the family. And so one year for her birthday, I asked her, well, what do you want to do? She goes, I want a Harry Potter birthday in some way. She's like, I'm getting old for it. I know, Dad, I'm 13 years old, but I want to embrace my childhood for a little bit longer. So she had her 4 best friends for a sleepover party. And what I did was, in the last Harry Potter book, there are these Horcruxes, right? And so the big thing about them is they're pieces of Voldemort's soul. And so they have like significant meaning in the book. And what I did was I created these Horcruxes. One was like a crown, one was a chalice, one was a book, and I hid them all over town where we lived. Like, I went and I hid them. And then what I would do is, her and her friends were walking, they had their cell phones, I would text them a clue, and they had to respond back to me with the answer to the clue, and then I would give them the coordinates of where the thing was hidden. And they needed to go and destroy this Horcrux, right? So it took me a couple hours to come up with this whole thing. It cost me $0 to do this, but to her, she said it was one of the greatest memories of her entire life, was going through that and doing the experience with her kids. And it was a little time and effort on my part, but the impact that it had on her and her friends in that capacity was way more than if I just said, okay, we're going to go to the movies. I'm going to spend $100 on the movies and the popcorn, or we're going to go to Great Adventure. We're going to go wherever. It was the time that I spent with them in that capacity. So I appreciate you saying that, and it brought me back to a good memory there. So for you then, you mentioned, Craig, that one of the things that you've been really intentional on was thinking about the legacy that you're leaving for your kids. So think about one habit that you have changed in your life in the past 7 years that your kids could say, I saw Dad do this differently, and it resulted in this huge impact in his life. What would that one thing be that you've changed in your life that your kids have seen you do that they will take and perpetuate moving forward for their own kids?
Definitely holding on to faith right now, and just kind of, understanding what's in our control and what's not in our control, and doing the right things. Them seeing me walk that out has been such an impact on my middle, who's been through the thick and the thin. But not just that, just not raising my voice all the time. Not like, I used to just get so frustrated, because when I was a single parent, dude, it was free for all. I was their best friend more than I was their dad, right? And as hard as it was to make that transition from friend to father, right? Because you can still be their best friend and be their father. You just can't be only their friend, because there's too much leeway. There's too much leniency on certain things, because you're trying so hard to not hurt your friend rather than protect your child. And that was a powerful realization for me. And I think that they see that, they know that. And there's been many times where I've had to really just kind of stop things and say, hey, I understand that this isn't your first choice or what you'd really want to be doing right now at this moment. And I know that you probably don't want to be doing what I'm asking you to do. But the reason that I'm asking you to do it, and we are doing it, is because it's important for you and I, for our growth, for you becoming a responsible and respectful man. Then you need to be acting differently. And my boys are all growing up. My youngest is 3, and thank God he takes after my wife. He is just beautiful. He's borderline genius. The kid he can put the entire map together. He knows all the states. He knows all the capitals. He's been reading since just before he turned 2. It blows my mind to watch him function, because I just seeing it happen is crazy. And it's like, my oldest was kind of like breaking the ice. The middle is kind of like the one that's taught me the most, and my youngest has the benefit of hopefully the best version of their father because of all the stuff that we've been through. And it's like really fighting to get it right with all of them, but really noticing how much the better version of me has affected the youngest. Because had I not made those changes, I don't know that he'd be there. And he's mostly with my wife. He's a mama's boy.
Right.
He's all over daddy when he gets that moment. But the time that she spends, and that's important for all parents, the time that she spends intentionally working on learning growth during this moment where they're a sponge has been absolutely beautiful, dude. It has been absolutely beautiful to see.
And I think that developmentally, from my experience in education, Craig, that's pretty typical, where in those early developmental years, in child development, the kids will gravitate more towards their mother. Their mother provides that level of safety for them, and it's how they view the world is through their interactions with their mother. When boys get into trouble is when they're 13, 14, 15 years old, and that's still the case. There needs to be that transition period where the father steps in, and while he's not going to be the quote unquote safety blanket, he needs to provide the guidance and support where the kid needs to understand, I need to be able to step up and provide this level of safety and security for myself now. So that's where the father comes in the late elementary, early middle school years, and the kids need to understand that. So for mothers listening right now, when your son goes away from you, and he will, there will be times where he acts like a little asshole and you don't understand what the hell is going on with him. He's testing his boundaries with you, and he's also testing his own mettle, his own level of being able to be resilient and self-reliant, and that's a good thing. And so having a male role model in your son's life during that time is really imperative for them to see how men are interacting, and for them to gain this level of understanding about themselves, what I am capable of. And that doesn't happen if the mom is always there coddling the young man. They will come back to you. I promise you they will, because they're going to go away. They're going to start living on their own, and they're going to have no fucking clue how to do anything. Mom, how do I bake a cake? How do I do this? How do I order, whatever it is, they're going to come back to you because they still need that. And then that relationship will rekindle. So for mothers listening, it's okay if your kid is pushing back when they're, between 10, 12, 14, 15, 16 years old. It's okay. It's natural that those things happen. And for dads, when the kids are there and they're looking for your guidance, be there for them. Now it's your time to shine. Now it's your time to step up. If you've been lax in an area, you still have an opportunity to step up and help your kids. So Craig, in that realm, when we started this episode, before we were recording, you and I had a conversation, and you were saying not only has it been tricky with the holidays, and I'll start with this question first, and then I'll go into the deeper question. So during the holidays, you were traveling a whole lot, and the holidays, it's a shit show anyway. You have family coming, you're spending way too much money, you're eating too much, you're drinking too much. It's a month-long party from Thanksgiving till New Year's, a month-plus long party. So is there anything that you can give to us as a piece of advice for people that got off the train a little bit? They were this is me included. I trained for a Spartan, and I was in really good physical condition when I got to the Spartan. In the last month or so, month and a half, I've went away from those healthy habits. Even when I'm at the gym right now, I'm not feeling it in the same way that I did before. I'm going through the motions a little bit. So one, help us recognize it's okay. And then two, a piece of advice you might give to those who are listening about that.
So 100%, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. And Dennis, you'll agree, it comes back on so much faster than it came off. Um, Man, I was just sharing with you before we got on. I spent 30 days basically in Cleveland, Ohio, and I didn't work out a single workout because I was working 12-hour days, and I literally ate my face off because I was on an expense card. So I too am regrouping and refocusing. My biggest piece of advice is don't wait for a perfect time because there isn't one. Number one, there is no perfect time to start. If you feel like you need to do something, don't wait until New Year's. Don't wait until January 1st. Don't wait until Monday. Don't stop waiting, okay? Because there is never going to come a perfect time. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be this holiday or your cat's cousin's bar mitzvah, whatever it is. There's always going to be some freaking excuse as to why you can't start. But it's just little habits create big results. Even the littlest thing is getting to bed at a decent hour and getting good rest and feeling more energetic the next day and eating a little bit better and not being lethargic and doing all those things. I always know that no matter what happens, enjoy yourself in the moment when you can, but you still don't need to drink and eat your face off to be happy. And I think that as a society, everything in our life revolves around drinks and food. In order for you to get together with friends, you go to a bar, you go to a restaurant. Where are we going to eat? What are we going to do? Birthday party, who's cooking what are we going to have? Are we ordering pizza? What a cake? Barbecues, who's bringing the beer? It's just our entire life revolves around food and drink. I'm really working on trying to help my clients focus more on things like this. Like, you want to get together, cool. You want it to be around food or drink? Go have a coffee and a pastry. Make it small. Make it something that's not huge. Pack a lunch. Go for a hike. Go to a park. Go make it a more outside thing. Get some fresh air. Do some different things. But in order to get back on track, you literally got to draw a line in the sand, bro. You know that this is coming for you. You got to draw that line in the sand and say, I know what I need to do. I know what needs to happen. I'm always committed to something. What am I committed to right now? And that's the biggest key, even for me. Like, I was committed to enjoying an expense card in Cleveland, committed to getting extra sleep instead of getting my workouts in. I was committed to getting through that 30 days. Well, I'm back home now. And, as we talked earlier, I came back home and there were other things that kept me from getting back on track. Today was actually day one. Today was day one, getting on and speaking on a couple podcasts with people today and just kind of sharing my heart. I kind of took a detox from social media for a couple of weeks, and I needed to draw that line in the sand. And one of the defining moments for me was the realization of, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? How do I want my children to talk about their father? Do I want them to share that, he was this dude that when something terrible in his life happened, he gave up and laid around and did nothing? Or did he show up? Was he a rock? Was he there for other people? Did he help others? What was the impact that I had on them and other people? And that's kind of where it's at, man. It's like, stop putting all of those wants, hopes, and dreams into a box labeled someday, because it's never coming.
Right.
It's just not coming, dude. It's not. So if you're waiting to get back on track, or you want to get there and you got to do it, your willingness to change needs to become greater than your acceptance to remain the way you are right now.
I love that. I just did a post recently, and it was very simple. I wrote down 46 things that I've learned in my 46 years. And one of the things that I learned was things change when things change. And here's the thing, no one is coming to save you. Really, like if you want to make a change, it starts with looking at yourself in the mirror, understanding that, taking full responsibility for it, and then making the changes. It's that simple. It really is that simple. There's so many ways that we can make excuses. And you mentioned one of the clips that I pulled from our last podcast was that idea of no one is coming to save you. Like you need to step up and do these things for yourself. And it's definitely something that I've taken from that episode, and I have done my best to put into practice in my own life. And the other thing, Craig, was mentioning you jumped on a couple podcasts today. That's the thing. When you go and you speak about it, you put it out there into the world. Now there's no bullshit. It's not, there's no day called someday anymore. You talked about it today on 3 different podcasts. So now it's out there. Now you're going to have to follow through on it. So I love that you decided to do that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about before we get to the end of the episode was, as we were talking in the beginning, you had mentioned it has been a tough time during the holidays. I mean, the holidays are crazy anyway. Family in and out, you were traveling, but you also lost a close friend within the last week of your life. And as we were talking, you got very emotional about it. And I said, Craig, listen, here's the thing. I had a conversation with my son last week. He had a friend who lost a family member. And he said, Dad, what do I say? How do I help him out through this? And I said, Dan, here's the thing. Grief is such a tricky emotion, especially for men. It really is. And there was never a script on how do you handle loss as a human being, but as a man. And I remember growing up, when we had a loss in my family, my father would get really angry. It was the emotion that was the most accessible to him. So my grandmother died, and my dad would get mad at my mom, and he'd start an argument with her. He'd yell at us when his brother-in-law died. It was things like that. And I remember thinking, what the hell is wrong with him? But it's all that he knew. And I think men seem to minimize their emotion during situations like that. I also think they will push them away during situations like that. They'll access more readily available emotions, anger being one of them. So you've had a situation where during the holidays you had a lot going on, and you had a close personal friend pass away. So if you're listening to this now, and I just mentioned my son asked for advice, what advice would you give to him as far as like, Dad, how do I help my friend deal with loss or deal with grief? What advice might you give, Craig?
So one of the tools that I've been using for myself, and Dennis, I went through all of the emotions you mentioned. I definitely didn't handle it well at first, but I know me, and I know how to deal with it. So I was angry, but I wasn't angry towards other people. I knew to separate myself from it the best that I could. There is no right or wrong answer for how anybody should grieve. So if anybody is going through grief right now, understand nobody should ever tell you how you should feel. Okay, there is no time frame. You shouldn't feel better in a day or a week. Maybe it takes longer. Maybe you never feel better, and that's up to you. I encourage you to, rather than grieve the loss and focus on the sadness, to ask individuals to share a memory that they may have with your loved one that you may not have been a part of. Maybe, and I thought about this with my close friend that passed, and I was sharing this with you. It was like, I selfishly have so many wonderful memories of just him and I that other people will never get to experience. They're never going to get to experience that, but they can through the loss of me sharing these moments. And, they're those you had to be there moments, but it's not really a you had to be there moment anymore, because people can benefit from hearing the joy that their loved one brought to your life. So when you're able to functionally, and it takes time, and you can visibly see it on my face that, the emotion is still there, the raw emotion is still there. It's still in the back of my throat. But I think about my friend who he leaves a wife behind. He leaves a son behind. They found him in the morning. They're still going through the autopsy. He was young. He was 42 years old. He was a bodybuilder. He was in good health. And, I started thinking about challenging people that we hung out with and that knew us to, leave a good memory, leave a memory that you remember of him on his obituary, in a post, in a share, because these are the things that the family need the most right now, is to hear the impact and the legacy that their loved ones have left behind. How do you want to be remembered? And my friend he's remembered as probably the one of the kindest people I've ever met in my life, and would give you the shirt off of his back if it meant that it would help you more than it would help him. And it's like just taking that functional moment, because everybody's kind of at a different place with it, right? Some people aren't completely devastated and heartbroken, like a mother, a wife, a son, a father at a loss of somebody. They could just be a friend or a cousin. And not saying that the loss isn't as hard on them as it is. I'm just saying that we're all in different stages of it, where if you're not completely devastated and can't find words, and you can actually functionally share a story, do it, because the people that can't share right now need it. They need those moments. They need those positive reinforcements of what a kind person that person was, what a beautiful human being they were, and the legacy that they left behind.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate that raw emotion right there. There's a poem, Craig, that I would read to the initial Building Men crew back in the early 2000s when I first started this up as a principal. And it's a poem called What Will Matter by Michael Josephson. I believe I've read it on the podcast before, but I feel like this is an appropriate time. And it's one, if you're dealing with grief, or if you're thinking about your own legacy, and I'll have that in the title of this podcast somewhere, because it's been a thematic part of our conversation. So it's called What Will Matter by Michael Josephson. It was written in 2003. Ready or not, someday it will all come to an end. There will be no more sunrises, no minutes, hours, or days. All the things you collected, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. Your wealth, fame, temporal power will shrivel to irrelevance. It will not matter what you owned or what you were owed. Your grudges, resentments, frustrations, and jealousies will finally disappear. So too, your hopes, ambitions, plans, and to-do lists will expire. The wins and losses that all seemed important will fade away. It won't matter where you came from or what side of the tracks you lived on at the end. It won't matter where you lived. It won't matter if you were beautiful or brilliant. Even your gender and skin color will be irrelevant. So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is what you learned and what you taught. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enrich, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will matter is not how many people knew you, but how many will feel a lasting loss when you're gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories of those who loved you. What will matter is how long you will be remembered, by whom, and for what. Living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It's not a matter of circumstance, but of choice. Choose to live a life that matters. Michael Josephson, 2003. Love that poem. Felt like it was an appropriate way to put a clincher on our episode today. Craig Daigle, my man, I really, really appreciate our conversation today. Much love for you, brother. Last question that I love to ask at the end of the podcast now is, someone listened to this episode, they got a ton of value from everything you talked about, your life story, your level of authenticity, transparency. You put it all out there on the table for people to consume, and you do it in such a real, raw, unfiltered way. If somebody turns off this podcast right now, there's one thing that they can do right now, and by doing this one thing, it will change their life. What's that one thing someone can do right now, Craig?
Just remember, all that you're going through right now is temporary, no matter how hard it is. Sometimes just getting out of bed is all that you can do, and you should be proud of that, because life is hard. Life is hard. Nobody ever said it's going to be easy. So just know that you're not alone. and you can always reach out to people. You can reach out to individuals like Dennis. You can reach out to individuals like me. There's always a space for you. So if you feel alone, just know that you're not.
That's awesome. Building Men audience, go one step further than you thought you could go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.